welcome to how to create a network deployment of Autodesk Revit Architecture 2010. My name is Harlan Brum. I'm the Global Technical Lead for Revit Architecture with Autodesk Product Support. Today I'll be walking through the steps necessary to create a network deployment of Revit Architecture. Before you begin, there's some important things to make sure that you're aware of before actually stepping in and creating a deployment. The first is, let's make sure that you've reviewed the installation documentation that comes with the product. It's a good overview of how to do a general installation of the product and may answer some of the questions you have during the process. Also, make sure you check the system requirements page and that your machines meet at least the minimum system requirements in order to run Revit. Confirm that you have administrator privileges, or whoever is going to be install the products is at least an administrator on those machines. You don't need to be a domain administrator, but having administrator privileges ensures that all the files are written properly to the different directories. Make sure you go ahead and turn off any antivirus software that may be running in the background on those machines as well. Antivirus software often does real-time checking as files are added to the computer. This real-time checking can often cause conflicts during the installation process, may cause delays, and may actually cause corruption of the installation itself. So make sure you turn off any antivirus software you have on before proceeding with the installation. Also, close any other open applications that may be running on the machine. This also will just free up space and allow Revit to do what it needs to do during the installation process without any conflicts with other applications. Make sure you know your serial number and your product key. We're going to talk about where you can locate that information, but it's required for the installation process, so have it handy. Make sure you know the name of the server that's running the Network License Manager for network licensing. This is critical as you'll enter this during the deployment creation phase, and every machine will look to this server. Also, make sure you know the license server model. Is it a single server? Is it a redundant server setup? Or is it a distributed model? Understanding this is also critical because you're going to input this information during the deployment creation, and every machine will know this information once it's inputted in the dialogues. And then finally, before you start creating a deployment, make sure you copy the contents of the DVD media to your local hard drive. Running the setup and deployment wizard from your local hard drive will speed things up and allow the installation to proceed more smoothly. If you're wondering where your serial number and product key are located, well, the first place to look is on your product box. On the back label of your product box, you'll find the serial number and the product key that you may need. Place you can look for your serial number and product key is if you got an electronic fulfillment of your software, which means you downloaded the software from the website from the subscription center. In your electronic fulfillment email, you'll have your serial number and product keys and the number of seats that are available. So you'll need that. If you did electronic fulfillment, you'll need to get that email in order to find the serial number and product key for your product. Finally, another place that's available to get your serial number and product key is on the subscription center if you're a contract administrator. So you can contact your contract administrator within subscription center, and within the coverage report you can actually see the serial numbers and the product key for the product in question. We also have product keys posted on Autodesk.com, but your serial number you're going to have to get from one of these three places. So let's get started with creating a deployment. So instead of picking install products, we're going to choose the option to create a deployment. But first, let's look at that documentation that's available. So the documentation includes a README first guide and installation guide, which is a PDF file that walks through a basic installation. This actually doesn't walk through creating a deployment, but it does include the basic setups and what's included in a standard installation that you can maybe read through and leverage a little bit to help you activate and get ready to use the product. There's also a feature summary and a known issues document I encourage you to look at. So let's go ahead and click Create a Deployment. And now we actually need to begin a deployment by specifying a location. Now this can be a network server location. You can specify a map drive, but I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend mapping to actually a network storage location for the drive. Then you can give the deployment a name, and we click Next. Now we begin actually creating the deployment and getting those settings ready to go for the application so that we can begin to know what's included within our network deployment. Revit is going to initialize the setup, and as well it's doing that, you can notice those same documents that we showed about earlier are also available in the left-hand pane under Read This First, Installing Revit 2010, the feature summary, known issues, and finally there's also an ability to go to Utilities where you can download utilities. So first we need to accept the software license agreement. In order to proceed, you must change this option to I accept. You can print it if you need to, and then just click Next. Now you'll enter in your product serial number that we got off the box or in another location, and then you'll enter in your product key as well. Then if you so wish, you can enter your first and last name to let Revit know, who's installing the product. Now we get into the general deployment settings, so we can specify a log file on the network and specify the network location. So here we can actually configure our deployment. You click the configure button. Now we can tell it which language, what default units, what architectural usage is available. We can also say what type of templates and libraries are available, metric or imperial, and what families. We can choose to skip content. We can also specify the content location on a network location. Now we can choose a network license if we want, and we can choose this server model, and then we can enter the name of the licensed server. Now we can define default file locations when you run this deployment on an individual machine. So you can change these locations to either a network location, which is specified here, or the user's hard drive if you wish. Now we have the ability to apply a service pack. We can add one from our local drive. We can choose not to include one. In this case, I'm going to download Web Update 2 and apply that to my deployment to make sure that it goes out. At any time you can cancel it, but when this completes, it'll be downloaded and we can actually add that into our deployment. We can either append or merge. Now we have some options about Communication Center, so we can either enable or disable live updates from a server or from Autodesk. We also can enable RSS feeds. And now we have some additional options about CER or Customer Error Reports, Subscription Center, and Info Center. Then our configuration is complete. Now you get some information, and now the installation proceeds. And you'll notice in the deployment creation on the left hand side tells you everything that's going to be installed. Now Revit's going to proceed through the installation process, installing each item in the list as we go down. It'll install all the components that are needed: Visual C++ libraries, .NET Framework, DirectX, Autodesk Design Review, and finally Autodesk Revit Architecture 2010. What will happen is this will be packaged into an admin image folder so that you can actually double click on the exe and allow everyone to install Revit with the settings that you've specified within this deployment. When Revit's actually finished installing, next you're going to see the content extractor. Now this same dialog appears if you're doing just a simple installation of the product. What this is doing is downloading CAB files from the web and making sure that they're extracted and available for users when you run this deployment. It's actually downloading help files and all the content that's necessary in order for the installation of Revit to proceed correctly. You'll notice the target folder is actually the folder that we specified that was available for where content should be placed for our deployment. And that's where we're going to direct users to go get this content. So this can be a shared location on a network if you need it to be. And that's really critical. Make sure if you're going to put it on the network, make sure all users have access to that target folder location. Otherwise, they won't be able to get access to the content that's included as part of the deployment. Then the deployment will complete, and you can click Finish. Now that's it. Now you've created a Revit Architecture 2010 deployment.